quick content note before we begin. What you're about to hear is based on a real mass death event. I'll keep it YouTube safe, no gore, no graphic descriptions, but the psychological weight is heavy. That night, the jungle was breathing. Not as a metaphor, literally, like the trees around you were taking a slow inhale, holding it and leaving you alone with the sound of your own heartbeat, knocking against your ribs like someone pounding on a locked door from the inside. There was no wind, no birds, just a distant, steady insect hum, like an old cassette tape stuck on the same second, refusing to move forward. I'm standing at the edge of an empty clearing in a black ocean of vegetation, a clearing that used to be a gathering place. The light in my hand is weak, fractured across tall weeds rising from the ground like fingers reaching up from a shallow grave. The air smells like rotting wood and warm mud, mixed with something metallic, like old rust, the kind of scent your brain wants to call blood, even when you don't see a single drop. And then, the thing happened that begins the whole story. From deep inside the darkness, where there shouldn't be any houses, any people, any life, came the sound of a loudspeaker. Not clear, not a scream, not a call for help, just a broken human murmur, like someone speaking from very far away, and at the same time, so close you can feel breath brushing your ear. The sound rose and fell, returned, vanished, and then the jungle went silent all at once, as if it collectively decided not to listen. That's when I understood this wasn't an island surrounded by water, it was an island surrounded by jungle. An island whose name was once said on the news, then whispered in fear, then repeated in nightmares. Jonestown, the place where around 900 people died in a single day. If you're into true horror stories where the fear is real and the facts are even worse, go ahead and subscribe, because what comes next doesn't feel like history. It feels like something still unfinished. Because this isn't a typical ghost story. This is a story about living people being buried upright, and a single voice learning how to lock 900 souls behind a door with no handle on the inside. Jonestown was an agricultural settlement in Ghana, in South America, so far from the rest of the world that the end of nowhere would still be too generous. Thick jungle, mud that swallows your shoes, trails that vanish, travel that feels like you're peeling away from reality itself. And that distance was not an accident. The farther you are from the world, the easier it is for the world to stop hearing you. But Jonestown didn't start here. It started in America in the 1950s and 60s with a man named Jim Jones. In photographs, his smile always looks trained, not warm, not human, a smile that's been practiced in a mirror until it becomes a mask. Jones founded a religious and political group called the People's Temple. He drew people in with sermons about equality and justice, about fighting racism, about building a better life. The promise sounded clean, and then, slowly, the promise became a leash. That's the part people struggle to understand. Control doesn't arrive like a storm. It arrives like cold. You feel the first chill and tell yourself it's nothing. You keep living, you keep trusting, and one day you can't get warm anymore. The stories from that era describe a tightening circle, donations, isolation, loyalty tests, fear, dependence, shame, a gradual separation from anything outside the group until outside becomes a threat and the group becomes the only air you're allowed to breathe. Then, in 1977 and 1978, under growing pressure from media scrutiny, allegations, and defectors, large portions of the group moved to Guyana and built a settlement they called a farming project.
But it wasn't really a farm. It was a closed world. And the jungle around it wasn't just scenery. It was a wall, a living wall, buzzing, wet, endless, that makes you feel trapped even when the sky is wide open. People who arrived there believed they were walking into a utopia, But utopias don't need guards. Utopias don't need loudspeakers. And Jonestown had both. At night, the loudspeakers became the town's heartbeat. A voice would spill into the darkness, giving instructions, lecturing, scolding, praising, warning, sometimes for hours, until words turned into something like a drug, something you didn't even notice you were swallowing. And then came the white nights. Nighttime assemblies described as drills, loyalty tests, emergency alerts, where fear was sharpened and trust was pressed down like wet clay. Some accounts describe them as rehearsals for the end. Imagine sleeping in a thin wooden cabin, your back slick with humidity, your lungs working harder than they should, and then suddenly the loudspeaker splits your sleep in half. Get up. Now. You stumble outside into mud. You see faces walking like sleepwalkers, eyes open but empty, children clinging to parents. And at the end of the path, you reach the pavilion, a big open-sided structure with a roof. No walls, yet somehow it still feels like you're inside, like you've entered a room you can't leave without permission. The air there is different, not just hot, heavy, like breathing through cloth. And a single thought grows louder every minute. If you run, the jungle will swallow you. If you run, the group will call you a traitor. If you run, the outside world won't believe you. And some people did try. Messages, pleas, quiet signals sent outward like smoke from a fire you're not allowed to admit exists. Concern reached the United States, enough that a congressman named Leo Ryan traveled to Guyana to investigate claims that people were being held against their will. The day he arrived, it was theater. Tense smiles, songs, carefully staged normalcy, cameras rolling, people trying to look happy while their bodies didn't match the performance. Because real terror doesn't like bright lights. Real terror hides in the tiny details no camera can fully capture. The fast glance between two people that disappears instantly. The trembling hand during a handshake. The person standing off to the side, watching, not participating, like they're counting breaths instead of minutes. Reports and accounts say some residents quietly asked to leave. They wanted out. They wanted a corridor back to the world.
And that cracked the glass. Because leaving Jonestown wasn't just leaving a place, it was leaving a mind that believed it owned you. The next day, while the delegation prepared to depart from a nearby airstrip at Port Kaituma, violence erupted. Leo Ryan was killed, along with others. People were injured. The line between investigation and disaster snapped in half. After that, nothing could go back to normal. There would be no calm negotiation, no clean resolution, no "we'll sort this out." There was only a man deep in the jungle, aware that authorities were coming, aware that the story was breaking open, aware that the system of fear he built over years could collapse in hours. And that's when the loudspeakers returned, louder. What makes this even harder to stomach is that parts of the final hours were recorded. There is an infamous audio tape associated with the end, cataloged as FBI tape Q042, captured in the settlement during the last moments. Just knowing that audio exists is enough to chill your skin, because some things should never be preserved. Some sounds should die the moment they're made. Now, picture the pavilion again. The sun falling fast. In the jungle, darkness doesn't arrive gently. It drops like a curtain. People gather. They don't look at each other, because if they do, they might see the truth in someone else's eyes, and the truth is contagious. In the center, the leader's voice, not always screaming. Sometimes it turns soft, and that softness is the part that terrifies you, because here, gentle isn't mercy, it's glue. In transcripts of the recording, he says words that almost sound like a confession. "I have loved you." And then he keeps talking, like he's trying to convince himself before he convinces them. And then comes the moment the human brain wants to reject. The impossible becomes possible, not because people want it, but because fear has been doing its work for a long time.
Fear planted in the drills, in the isolation, in the stories about enemies outside, in the warnings that the world beyond the jungle is worse than death. History still argues about how to label what happened, especially because children died and because coercion and armed control are part of many accounts. The words swing between mass suicide and mass murder, depending on which evidence and testimonies you emphasize. But whatever label you choose, the outcome is the same. A clearing full of bodies. A sudden, permanent silence. Outside the pavilion, the jungle stood like a blind witness. It didn't interfere. It didn't protest. It only listened. Now, imagine you're one of the people who ran. Not far, not free, just out of sight. Behind a cabin, under the edge of the pavilion, into the first layer of trees. You hear the loudspeaker. You hear footsteps moving back and forth. You hear crying that someone is trying to smother. And then, one by one, the sounds disappear, until the silence becomes heavier than any scream.
The next day, authorities arrived. They found the aftermath. Hundreds of bodies. Numbers differ slightly depending on how deaths are counted and which locations are included. Some sources cite 909 in Jonestown itself. Others list totals like 913 or 918 when including the airstrip killings. And the number, no matter what you choose to say, is not a statistic. It's air leaving 900 lungs on the same day. Afterward, the United States woke up to headlines that felt like a movie, except it wasn't fiction. Investigations produced a mountain of evidence: paperwork, photographs, tapes, documents. Much of the People's Temple history is preserved today in archival collections, including university archives and large historical repositories. Jonestown's story didn't disappear. It fossilized. And the question that remains isn't just, how did it happen? The question that stabs deeper is, how does a place stay alive after everyone in it dies? Because Jonestown didn't remain an event, it became a symbol, a warning, a word that tastes like metal when you say it out loud. Survivors described escaping the jungle, but not escaping the sound, not escaping the sense that something followed them. Not a ghost in the Hollywood sense, but a psychological imprint that hangs in the air like smoke you can't wash out of clothing. And the worst part is what it teaches us about evil. We want evil to look like a monster, but sometimes evil is just a calm voice through a loudspeaker, telling you that death is safety until you believe it. And right now, standing at the edge of this clearing, I can't stop thinking. This island wasn't surrounded by water. It was surrounded by silence. The silence of a jungle that saw everything, swallowed everything, and still stands. So here's a simple experiment for tonight. Turn off the lights. Stay completely quiet for 1 full minute and listen for the sound that comes from nowhere. A distant hum, a faint murmur, something that almost feels like breathing. If you hear anything that shouldn't be heard, remember Jonestown. Remember that sometimes a place doesn't need claws or fangs or nightmares to destroy you. Sometimes it only needs one voice.